Hello and welcome back to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Another US election, another Russian disinformation campaign. On Wednesday, the US Department of Justice announced efforts to prevent Russian disinformation from influencing the 2024 US election. The director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, said he hoped the countermeasures would deter other adversaries, such as China and Iran, from meddling in the election. As the race for the White House heats up, many are asking why it is only now that the topic of disinformation is taking centre stage again. To explore that and related questions, I am joined by Jeremy Zogby. He's managing partner at John Zogby Strategies, and Professor Sergei Erofeev, a sociologist at Rutgers University. Gentlemen, both welcome to TVP World, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Hello.
Hi. So I'll start with you, if I may, Jeremy. These people didn't suddenly just appear, did they? I mean, various websites have been closed down by the Department of Justice, which they say are pushing Russian propaganda or disinformation. People have been arrested, detained, and so on. But why now? Why isn't this an ongoing effort?
Why now is a great question. Of course, you're talking to a pollster, somebody who grew up in this business and has been working in family business since I was 10 years old. I've seen election cycles going back to the 90s. And, there's this phenomenon known as October surprises. And of course, we're in September, we're in the fall, and this is about the time that political parties start to release information that they've been holding. Republicans are going to do it, Democrats are doing it. Of course, there are parties and institutions that are aligned with both of the political parties, and it just seems to be a pattern that we find out about this kind of these kind of stories weeks before the election. The reality is that there are still undecided voters who will determine the election. This is a close race. Let's not forget that. There are a lot of polls that are showing Harris ahead by a few points, but the reality is that that's within the margin of error in most polls. It's a hotly contested race, and this is the season where you start to see bombshell reports that have the intention of moving the needle. I want to give you one example. Back in 2016, of course, you mentioned there was the whole phenomenon with the Russian trolls on Facebook. Let us not forget that James Comey and his indictment of Hillary Clinton just days before the election, I think, according to the data that I was reading, I think had the uber effect in those undecided voters leading up. So this is going to be a very chaotic moment in this final stretch.
Yeah, but who does this help? Which side, Trump or Harris? Jeremy?
I suppose it's probably, I don't really want to take a stand on that because I don't really have a dog in this fight. I'm an independent analyst. I suppose the narrative is probably that it's going to benefit Trump, right? And that's been the case in 2016, and that was the case in 2020. Right. But there will be more issues that come to surface, economic issues, geopolitical hotspots. I mean, we have three powder keg regions: Ukraine, the entire Middle East, Taiwan. I suspect that one of those, or maybe if not all of those areas, are going to get more tense. There's going to be all kinds of major issues in the next week, and that I don't think that this is going to be the only thing that can move the needle.
No, certainly. Sergei, if I may come to you, I mean, when President Trump was elected in 2016, there was an enormous amount of media coverage over and allegations. Of course, we remember the Mueller report, which explored connections between Russia and Trump. Are we simply seeing that engine starting up again, just in case President Trump wins the election? What do you think, Sergei?
Well, thank you, Ashim. But first of all, we need to remember that the report of which followed those elections in 2016 did not actually state any misdoings on the part of Trump, any collusion with Putin. And here we should also remember that for Mr. Putin, it's not necessary at all to have any consent on the part of Mr. Trump for pursuing Mr. Putin's goals. All he wants to do, because he cannot directly affect the outcome of the elections, all he wants to do is to sow chaos. This is a part of that typical mafioso strategy which he uses. If he cannot be powerful enough, and he understands his limits, surely, then he can just disrupt the usual processes. And in this sense, I would be probably more straightforward than Jeremy, saying that in the end, it's clearly to the benefit of Mr. Putin when the American voters are puzzled, if they're bewildered. Clearly, that's how Mr. Putin is trying to pursue his goals. And even the fact that he recently, as Mr. Trump says, endorsed Kamala Harris. It's another special operation when Mr. Putin is trying to pretend that he's not supportive of Mr. Trump. And he's just giving him a pass so that Mr. Trump can say, look, Putin is not supporting me.
Right.
But again, it has to be repeated that Mr. Trump doesn't need to be in any collusion with Mr. Putin. Mr. Putin is doing his job independently.
He's doing his job. He's sowing confusion and chaos. But, I mean, some are suggesting that the reason for that is to keep people away from the polls altogether, or to, change their opinions on these hot-button issues that Jeremy just listed for us. Would you agree with that, Sergei?
First of all, I have to add that this tool is not new for the Russians at all. Of course, like the article in the Washington Post just published states, the tools have become more sophisticated on the part of the Kremlin. They are not so straightforward. But maybe not so many viewers of TVP world know that trying to launder these information campaigns is an old tradition on the part of the Kremlin. Mr. Putin and his administration, Mr. Kirienko, who is responsible for such operations in the Kremlin, they have done that regarding the Russian audience and Russian voters. They would pretend that there is some reputable source in the West, some influencer, some commentator, some blogger, some website made up makeshift small media, and people are supposed to believe that these are authoritative sources. So what Mr. Putin is doing now, he's just extending that old practice applied to the Russian internal political context,
right.
Extending that to what is going on in the USA.
Right.
I wouldn't overestimate the potential of such actions.
No.
What is very important is to be diligent, to be watchful.
Understood. Clear. Now, Jeremy, in the last few minutes that we have left, now, Iran and China, Trump refers to both of these countries and says, why is it only Russia that's being highlighted? I mean, Iran was identified as being linked to a hack and leak operation against both campaigns a few weeks ago, and yet we heard nothing about it. I mean, what is it about Russia that makes it far more newsworthy than Iran or China?
Well, I think there's a historical context. I mean, of course, the United States has been at loggerheads with Russia going back to even before the Cold War. I mean, and after World War I, there was the Red Scare. We don't have that as long of as antagonistic history with Iran and with China. There seems to be something about the Russian hysteria that can drive up the public. But to your point, yeah, there are other stories. I mean, just a week ago, I'm in the state of New York, and there was a major bombshell story that our governor, Kathy Hochul, her chief of staff, and now let us understand that the chief of staff in an administration is a very influential, powerful figure. The chief of staff turned out to be a foreign agent for the nation of China. So this is happening, and if we have to look at it in the grand scheme of things, I don't like that this stuff goes on, but the fact of the matter is this is what powerful nations do. The United States is often involved in clandestine operations, foreign intervention, election intervention, the toppling of governments, through its intelligence community. It's done it in Latin America, it's done it in Africa, it's done it in many nations throughout the world. This is an unfortunate reality, but the thing that we cannot deny is that each nation has its own internal issues, and yes, those can be exploited from abroad, but the United States has been a hyper-polarized nation going back to the 90s, and I don't think that had anything to do with Russian interference. We have been a divided nation going back to the Clinton administration, and it really took on a next level in 2000 with Bush versus Gore, and we have been just going off the rails in terms of a loss of national community. Can that be exploited? Absolutely, but sure, go ahead.
No, understood. I just want to bring Sergei in for the last few seconds that we have, Sergei, so very quickly, if you would. Is the division of society just making life easier for the Chinese hackers, the Iranian influencers, the Russia, and so on? And what should the government be doing about it, whichever arm of government you're talking about?
Well, absolutely right. Mr. Putin and China and other authoritarian leaders of the world, they definitely exploit these divisions within American society and wherever in the free world. They have certain illusions about that, though. I already said that the potential of these actions is not as high as can be portrayed sometimes. And still we should be vigilant and watchful about these attempts.
Yes, I mean, the Chinese sent a balloon over the United States, and that kind of flew around for ages. So
there is a playful element to that, which is more than just politics, And the nature of modern politics is much more to do with information games, and we're only in the beginning of understanding that. And modern politicians really pay attention to small details now more than ever. That's why what we are discussing today is of importance.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, both very much. Unfortunately, the clock has beaten us, but I'm sure that this is a topic we'll be talking about again shortly. Well, that's
happy to continue the discussion.
Thank you. That's all from us here on World Talks. Don't go away. Lots more coming up.